Welcome everybody to our webinar from SDS. If you didn't think you were going on this, you're now on it, and we're trying to make this as kind of obviously interactive as possible. We haven't done one for a while, webinar, so it's my team. I introduce myself. My name's Andrew Markham. I'm one of the directors at SDS. I head up our consultancy side of the business. I've got a couple of our consultants and our dear friend here today to talk about topics that's in the industry. Chris used to run this for me, and I used to come on, and he's now departed SDS, sadly. But we thought it'd be a good idea to carry on these at least once a month and be reactive to what's happening in the industry. Luckily, there's nothing going on at the moment, so we can easily find some topics. And then we wanted to do a bit of kind of hot topics or tips and hints from our product suite. Obviously, we can interact that with kind of Landval, some information about ProVal. So there's been a number of changes we've made to ProVal, and impact of what's happening in the sector of remodeling things from different inflation settings. We obviously SQL, lots of changes we've made again in SQL, so we can kind of finish some time, answer the questions, show you the impact of this if you would like. And we've got our new product Home Match, which is tracking the sales. So we're kind of here. We're not here to push the products, but we're here to kind of align you with the industry and what we potentially we can do within the product base. So let's introduce the team. I've introduced myself. We'll go around the table. Paul has kindly joined us today, and introduce yourself, Paul.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Paul Kristensen. I'm the technical manager at SDS. So I sit in the training and the consultancy team. Effectively, I'm the troubleshooter when it comes to ProVal and SQL. So those are my speciality areas.
Excellent. Duncan?
Hi, everyone. Duncan Smith, Commercial Director at WHG. Housing Group in the Midlands, own 22,000 properties, and have the dubious pleasure of subscribing to SDS products to do viability appraisals and that sort of stuff.
Thank you very much. John.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm John Stevens. I'm a consultant and trainer with SDS, and I've been delivering affordable housing for the last 30 years, mainly with housing associations and local authorities.
Great. So today's agenda, we've got the title, dubious title, today's development challenges. So what we were going to talk about on that. We have got Cassie on the screen. You might see her. She's our marketing lady who's organised all this and does great marketing things for us recently. And so she's got her camera off, but she's listening in and taking notes, and we'll be reviewing any questions. So this is trying to be as interactive as possible. If there's a burning question that comes from what Duncan's going to say, because we love Duncan, and some of the things that he might put some bombs in there as such. He's very pleased because he won a planning appeal yesterday. So he's
well, I'm not counting my chickens. Let's put it that way, Andrew. But it happened yesterday. We won't know for about 8 weeks in terms of the outcome, but it went quite well. It went quite well. Sorry.
Yeah. So hopefully not going to listen to this. So it's hopefully interactive. What we're going to, the agenda is going to be on today's development challenge. We're going to have a quick chat with Duncan about some Q&A, some questions, some challenges that he faces as on the ground delivering this at the moment. John Stevens is going to start and speaking about rents, and just give you an overview and reminder. Our rent settings are the methodology that's used on that, so that'll be a good kind of starting point. Paul is going to show us some hints and tips and show the inflation settings in ProVal, so we can actually remind ourselves, because it can be quite tricky to remember all the little bits and pieces where we can change things in ProVal, and the areas that we should consider and the impact of those. and then we will kind of answer any questions you have. And if we have time, we might go into the single cash flow, some element changes that we've done for ProVal, and discuss those impacts of what we've done, and SQL changes. And there's obviously been a number of SQL changes and what we're moving to SDS. And please, if there's any kind of questions, as I say, please pose them and we'll try and answer them. One thing before we get started is a reminder for everyone, if people do have to leave, SDS has got a user group meeting coming up on the 8th of November. It is in London. We have done one in Manchester earlier in the year at the CIH conference, a little smaller one, but this is a bums on seats live event. It's a networking event. We've got over 60 people booked in already. It's a free event. It's part of your support agreement we have with you. We would love all of you to attend, and share your ideas. We are going to show you the roadmap of what we are planning with SDS products, but we really want to hear from you, and it's a great opportunity to network with other development colleagues. We've got the great speakers lined up as well. So we've got Duncan speaking. Duncan's my hero. So Duncan's doing a little piece as well. So we want to try and make it as kind of aligned with the industry as possible. Okay, and it will be in London on the 8th of November. Right, let's get started. John, let's, if you're happy to share your screen. If the other guys, do you want to turn off your videos? Quite happy to do that. And let's see if we've had some technical challenges this morning with John. So if he can share his screen, that'll be great.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about rents, and I'm probably going to cross over with something that Paul's going to talk about, which is how we deal with inflation in SDS. Inside housing dropped on the mat, and I was a bit concerned. We've got this terminology in the sector, rent ceiling and rent cap, and even Inside Housing on the front cover called it a rent cap conundrum. I love Inside Housing, I love what I pick up from it, but I thought, no, it's rent ceiling, not rent cap. I am a bit of an anorak, and yeah, it might be a bit dry, but there is a difference between what we know in the sector as what is rent cap and what is rent ceiling. So I'm referencing the Inside Housing document there. I'm also referencing the ANORAC detail from the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities, which is the policy statement on rents. And within that document, which is attached to the consultation link, if you Google rent consultation, it comes up with this as one of the documents as part of the current rent consultation. And within this document is a table illustrating what is the rent cap, and the rent cap is totally different to rent ceiling, which is what is being talked about at the moment. The rent cap is the overall maximum from the original social rent target that was set in 2000. And that has increased over time with inflation of CPI plus 1.5%. So if everybody's getting concerned about this current consultation on rents, you're getting concerned about rent ceiling. You're not getting concerned about rent cap. Rent cap is the original maximum that the government wanted to set back in 2000, and it's travelled as a cap over time. And we have that data in the background of ProVal. So it's important, I think, today that we talk about the rent ceiling as the current consultation, and the rent cap has been with us since 2000 or more. So I'm trying to get a distinction between the consultation and what's gone on with rent cap. So all the way back in 2000, and I'm sorry to be a bit dry about this, there was some documentation, and it's a bit ironic that when I looked at that original documentation, it said we want a new system of rent setting that should not generate rents that are unaffordable to social tenants, and it shouldn't compromise either the financial health of the registered social landlord. You can see how old it is, referring to a registered social landlord, RSL, who are now called registered providers, RPs. But there was also a rent convergence debate at the time when we were trying to align local authority property rents with housing association rents and hopefully bringing them together. This was all hopefully setting up a rent setting in the social sector back in 2000. And bless them, Inside Housing are saying in their leader inside the latest version of Inside Housing, actually what we need is a sustainable model of rent setting. And it's a bit ironic that we can look on screen and see back in 2000, that was what we were trying to do. We were trying to come up with a formula or target rent, or we know it's social rent. And we came up with the formula, or they came up with the formula of 99 values, number of bedrooms, and what people earned. And that was the formula that came up with the social or target rent. It was given a cap, which is the rent cap, and that's the rent cap that we should be referring to as rent cap. What's going on at the moment is the government are saying, well, our current rent policy is CPI plus 1%, and what they're saying is we look at the CPI rate of September last year, and if we apply that to CPI plus 1 for rent inflation, we're going to end up with something like 10% rent inflation as of April next year. So that's why they put out this consultation, and they've said, can we put the brakes on what we understand as the CPI ceiling? Yeah, as a rent ceiling this time, guys, as a sector, because knowing your client base, they're already being hit by other costs, the cost of living and energy costs. Could we limit your rent rise in April next year? And that's what this consultation is about. I get a bit concerned that people talk about rent cap when it's actually rent ceiling, as you can gather. So there could be, if we stayed on track with that, it would be around about 11% potential rent rise as of April next year. So they put this consultation out with a proposal of 3%, 5% or 7% maximum. And if you look at the proposal contents, they actually prefer 5% themselves. And everything that they've looked at is actually modelled on a 5% inflationary increase to rents, only applying to existing tenants, not new properties or relets. That devil is in the detail. Obviously, you've got to think as a social landlord, am I applying one increase to one group of existing tenants and one to new tenants? You've got to take that on board. There is some discretion as to whether you apply this or not, and whether it causes you economic pain as a registered provider. The consultation also suggests potentially, what about a 2-year duration for a rent ceiling? But interestingly, the government's financial impact assessment attached to the consultation documents actually assesses the financial impact over 5 years. So maybe, is it 1 year? Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? They're saying that households will pay, so those outside of housing support that get their rent paid by housing benefit, those outside that system who pay their rent directly will pay 3.8 billion less in rent, again, over that predicted 5-year period. This is in their financial assessment. They also see in the same 5-year a reduction of 6.1 billion in housing benefit costs for that same particular client group, those that don't receive housing benefit and pay their rent directly themselves. So the total savings are 9.1 billion. Does that mean we're going to get an increase in grant to provide much needed affordable homes because we're creating this saving by this rent ceiling? People are talking who are in strategic partnerships. Do they need to renegotiate their SP grant rates based on reduced income? So that could be part of the conversation. RPs retain the freedom to set lower rent increases should they wish to. So you've got that in the mix as well. In addition, we've got key parts of the rent statement that's been adjusted to accompany this potential rent ceiling change. We are not proposing to make exceptions for particular categories of rented social housing at present. So in the past, they've made exceptions for supported housing, older people's housing, etc., things like that. They're not proposing exceptions at the moment. So I've pasted these sections out of the draft policy statement document. The proposed direction would not apply the 5% ceiling to the initial rent to be charged when they're first let and subsequently relet. So it's just for existing residents who are in properties currently. They are mentioning the formula rent will still be subject to rent caps, and these still increase by CPI plus 1.5 percentage points. I'll come back to this as a bit anarchy. What's going on? Well, we're actually being asked for a ceiling for next year. That's really what the consultation is about. But in the background, we've got rent caps, which you can't exceed, still are having CPI plus 1.5 percentage points. And at SDS, they embed this government direction in the background of the software. There is the caveat, where complying with the revised standard would jeopardize an RP's financial viability, they basically want you to talk to them about an exemption. So if it affects your viability, you need to talk to them about an exemption. But I've just missed out a slide. I just want to go back very quickly. If I jump through all of this. The policy statement on rents, which is the document attached to the current consultation, has been updated from February 2019 to August 2022. And inside it, they are demonstrating they have increased the rent cap from 2000 by inflation plus a variable amount in the background. So that's when we look on Proval and we see what the rent cap is. The rent cap is the maximum social housing rent you can charge. And this government inflation on that figure has progressed, and it's embedded, the same figures are embedded in the back of Proval. So when you set a social or target rent in using Proval software, where you're asked what local authority it is because of the local earnings index, what was this type of property worth in January 1999, and how many bedrooms does it have? Those are the elements of the formula that come together to set a social or target rent. And then this inflation factor from 2000 is applied to those figures right up until the current position. So let's not confuse rent ceiling with rent cap, is what I'm trying to say in a very anarchy way. The other things that I'll try and quickly jump through this slide right at the end is shared ownership. What about shared ownership rent inflation? Well, if you look at that, this is outside policy statement. Shared ownership, if you look in the capital funding guide, is based on retail price index plus 0.5%. So they don't mention CPI, it's the old-fashioned RPI plus 0.5%. And that is set by your organisation in Proval section G for inflation. And then we start to talk about local housing allowance. Well, how is that inflated? Well, that's inflated annually by government figures, which again, SDS put in the background of Proval. So when you put the postcode in on Proval, it comes up with the latest LHA, and then you say when the handover date is, and they apply the LHA inflation that's appropriate from the government guidance. SDS are not making things up. All we do is reflect the government guidance in terms of what's available as inflation. But probably what's most important in the current dynamic is we've got various cogs inside our viability assessments, and they're all being tweaked in different directions with what's gone on with the mini budget, as it were, and we've seen mortgage products being taken away. We've seen the topping out of the housing market, where it's gone from being a seller's market to a buyer's market. We're seeing this consultation on rent ceiling, but we're also seeing inflation on costs and materials, labour, etc. So all these are cogs inside our viability. And I'm seeing customers who are actually looking at their shared ownership sales and saying, how are we going to model that going forward and give me different scenarios on my sales? So on the one issue of rents, one specific issue of rent ceiling, there's a lot of data, but I actually think the bigger picture of what's going on in the economy and also what's going on with costs and sales and the housing market is going to have as much of an impact, all these cogs working together. That's pretty much it from me. I'm going to put it out there in case anybody else wants to jump in with conversation on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, John. Well, take a breath. Suck it up. So there's some interesting points, and it's the devil in the detail, isn't it? Just remind me when we will know the rent setting date.
It's a 6-week consultation, yeah, that ends in October, and sometime in the near future, we're being told. Now, looking at that rent statement document that's been amended with pink text from 1919 to 2022 August, I would suggest they pretty much made up their minds in terms of what's going to happen, and they're demonstrating their preferred option is 5%.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And so that leads quite nicely. If you stop sharing, John, that'd be great.
Right.
To we have, a commercial director with us. He's looking very happy. So just overview impact. What does that mean for you, Duncan, and how do you kind of see things panning out if this 5% is going to be agreed?
Well, funnily enough, we're doing some modelling. It has a massive effect on our business plan, and I think that's an obvious thing to say. If we're running a rent ceiling, reinforcing that message, John, of 5% versus cost increases of, I don't know, somewhere between 5 and 15%. Let's be honest, maybe even beyond in certain arenas. If we're talking about MMC, for example, you're talking about 15% and the 20% on top that it already was a premium. Then the effect on our business plan is not catastrophic, but certainly for our development ambitions, and I'm talking about the sector, not necessarily our personal, WHG's personal business plan. It's about, that new supply will be fettered as a consequence of it. We're wrangling with what that means for our development strategy presently. I'm really glad that John identified the issues with strategic partners. We took a decision not to bid as a strategic partner into the AHP 21-26, which, if you'll forgive me for being a little smug, now looks like a monumentally brilliant decision, because our strategic partner friends have fixed grant rates and spiraling cost increases and a rent ceiling to deal with. So good luck to them. I suppose my issue is still this: housing need hasn't diminished as a consequence of a rent ceiling consultation or the world. In fact, I would suggest housing need or housing demand has increased exponentially post-pandemic, post and current cost of living crisis increase. And it's only going to be organisations, registered providers, maybe some local authorities, of course, who are going to produce the new affordable housing for those new customers. And any ceiling on the amount of rents that we're allowed to increase will fetter our ability to deliver those new affordable housing for those new customers. We're already seeing some, not necessarily nervousness, but enhanced inquiry levels about how confident we are about selling shared ownership. And those who know me and have heard me speak before, I'm an incredibly huge advocate for shared ownership, and I will continue to be so. I think the demographic and the earning profile of our shared ownership customers is likely to change, i.e. people will need to earn more. And again, I appreciate that's a monumentally obvious statement, but in the context of that demand, it will just be for the individuals or the households who are seeking to access open market housing that can now only afford to access shared ownership. So I see a steady demand for that, but obviously there will be pockets where individual local authorities or individual organisations policies around selling to customers will be challenged as a consequence. The big thing for me at the moment is about trying to pin our tail to the cost donkey that keeps running away from me at 476 miles an hour. And, you know, it's almost the governance, contracting, agreeing a price vicious circle. Because, you know, our machines, our organisations are fairly chunky machines which have, you know, groups of members which approve development schemes. And by the time I've got one approval, 10 days later, that approval's out of date and I've got to go back around the loop again. So that's a big challenge for us, being nimble.
And is that led to kind of the contractors going, no, thanks, we don't want to put on it at the moment?
We haven't seen many people pull away from schemes. No names, no pack drill, of course, Andrew. But what we have seen is our ability to negotiate a fair deal becoming more difficult to do. Because contracting's a tough job, right? I always say that to contractors. It's not how much you delight me, it's how little you disappoint me. That's the phraseology for contracting for me. And in this particular circumstance, they're continuing to disappoint me regularly by saying, well, what your design brief requirements, you know, we want to build, you know, as much as we can net zero carbon. That is becoming really difficult for them to assess in the cost environment. It's difficult for us then to fund in the cost environment, especially if we have a rent ceiling on what we're allowed to charge. And therefore, those moving parts are really, really difficult to bring together to get a scheme approval. And I'm sure that there are colleagues on the webinar who would have similar experience to that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of things I want to come back on there, but questions. Guys, there's quite a few people on this, and thank you for attending. It will be recorded, so you can see kind of John's slides and kind of digest that in your own time. Any questions posed to us? Sorry, John, question?
I've got a question. No, but you carry on. Yeah.
I was just saying questions to the audience. If you want to pose a question, please do it in the chat and we'll try and answer it. But John, yeah.
Yeah, Duncan, I'm interested, having been engaged with the sector, about mortgage rescue, and do you feel that is a responsible part of also dealing with shared ownership sales, to actually have a sort of policy about, I don't know whether it's reversion to rent or a sort of, you know, mortgage rescue policy?
I can only speak personally, John. From my personal perspective, I think that's a duty. And I fully support it. You know, not the current organisation that I work for, but those who know me previously from Festival Fortis, it was definitely something that we ran alongside shared ownership programme. Difficult again to get right and to fund and to be transparent, and customers' needs, having a policy around it. You know, quite a difficult thing to manage, but I think it's necessary. Yeah, I would fully support my current organisation, if approved, getting into the situation where we ran a mortgage rescue alongside our shared ownership programme, definitely. I do hope, I mean, not that the IMF will agree with me, John, I do hope our recession that we're obviously going to have, let's be really, really clear about it, is going to be light and short rather than deep, dark and perennial. Do you know what I mean? There has to be some shift relatively quickly, and maybe that's a general election within the next couple of years, or the upcoming of a general election next couple of years that changes that economic policy. I think them rowing back on what they did last week is hugely unlikely. So we're going to get the effects of that for a little period of time. But I think the underlying thing is, again, that need and demand for our additional delivery of housing is still there. Our wonderful planning system in this country, not that I'm segueing into talking about what happened yesterday, is still abject and in need of a massive overhaul. So yeah, look, I realise I'm posing more problems than answering the question, John, but maybe that's what I'm here to do.
Can I just go interactive? One question you came out, John, saying new properties are not going to have the inflation. So are we a bit more confident with our appraisals for next year then, Duncan? And it's just the impact of the following year and what settings we're going to have from there.
Do you want to go first, John, and I'll?
Yeah, I was surprised when I came across that it's basically, it's about existing residents, not about new properties or relets. So that makes you think immediately of Proval. Looking at my Provals, you know, what have I got in inflation for the following year? That's really leads on to, is this a 2-year ceiling? They're modelling 5-year ceiling. Yeah,
if I'm in construction now and then my unit's coming in April next year, I'm applying CPI +1?
That's my reading of it. Yeah, that's my reading of it, and so that's looking at the policy statement document. Yeah, but this is a consultation that's running until October. We don't know the outcome of it. We've just got draft documents. So
perhaps we can have a follow up on that when it actually happens. Sorry, Duncan, I'm lining you up for another.
No. I was just wondering when John Stevens was available for dinner parties, so he could turn up and talk to us about rents over a glass of wine. Do you know what I mean?
So with everything going on, then, you know, market conditions, you know, market values. Nothing has changed on delivery. We're still not delivering enough houses to actually kind of bring the wholesale price down. So is it a short, sharp shot? You know, Savills we're saying it's going to be, James Lang sales going to be 4% maybe the end of this year, and then rebouncing kind of end of next year. So is it something to us to worry about, or just go, look, this didn't happen in the pandemic. We're talking ourselves down. There's still a massive supply shortage of affordable homes, shared ownership homes, and outright sale homes in the right location. So should we be worried? Duncan.
Oh, sorry, I get to answer that question, do I? Oh, brilliant. Yes. I'll just obtain my crystal ball. Look, I'm a positive person, Andrew, and I'm going to answer the question positively. The supply side of things remains so constrained. I don't see a massive house price correction or reduction, whatever word you want to use, because of that supply side issue. Obviously, the cost of getting a mortgage is going up. I'm doing a great job of stating the obvious. And therefore, that will impinge, firstly, at the top end of the market, of course, which will then filter down. As I said earlier, I think that may have the effect on us as organisations that our shared ownership customers have to earn more to access shared ownership, and therefore there will be more space in the marketplace at the sort of medium, I suppose, end, above shared ownership, but below the top end of the marketplace. I actually think that could be quite useful for a period of time where people like me, for example, can re-enter the market. So I sold my apartment in Worcester 3 or 4 months ago, cash in the bank, because I couldn't actually access what I wanted in terms of the housing market at that particular time. So there may be a little bit of a rebalancing arrangement that goes on there. I cannot see wholesale massive reductions in price. I just can't. Who knows?
Okay. John, what's your thoughts quickly?
Well, I have family members looking at being first-time buyers, and the properties they were looking at a few weeks ago are all coming back with, "Are you still interested? Here's a price reduction."
Right. Okay.
But, you know, I'm in the south of England on that. I don't know.
I think it needs to do something just to make it kind of happen, and then it will settle down. It's always that, headline news, isn't it, which makes people uncomfortable. But I think the underlying things are still there, that keep prices at a reasonable level. So we've got a couple of questions. Amy Stevens, thank you. Are you seeing contractors moving away from fixed price contracts and ask for inflation-linked contract costs as part of their procurement process? Sorry, Duncan, do you want to answer that?
They can ask as much as they like. It's my starting point. I cannot see a position where we are going to entertain inflation-linked contracts, because the guaranteed maximum price contract that we have is the option to reduce risk for our organisation. Please don't proclaim any news around that to any of the contracting base. They can come and ask. I'm definitely not up for that.
Okay, and a follow-up question from that is, from Claire Asprey, is saying, should we strengthen our due diligence around contractors? Check their financial viability. How do you do that? How do you review that?
Yeah, I think that's a perfectly astute thing. And again, colleagues may be reporting the same as me on this. Insolvency cover and insurance is incredibly difficult to obtain at the moment, and we're very, very sympathetic, certainly, to small and medium-sized enterprises who may not be able to demonstrate the requirements for those insurances. So I think that's definitely something that the sector should get on board with, because without contractors, we can't build anything. Let's be really, really clear. So support as much as we can. Due diligence wise, yeah, I suppose it's about asking the right questions. I'm not entirely sure that third-party organisations testing people's credit scores give us the best visibility. I think if you ask me my methodology, speak to the contractor, give us your management accounts for the last 3 to 6 months, tell us what your exposure is to X, Y, and Z in terms of trades, etc. And generally, if they want to do the job, they're going to release that information to you, albeit on a confidential basis, of course.
Yeah, sure.
So I think it is about spending time with those individual organisations. Repeat business, we do a lot with organisations again and again and again, and they're used to our requirements and we're used to them. I don't think we're at the point of revised payment terms and stuff at the moment, to be perfectly honest. All of the contractual things should work quite nicely, but talk to your contractors.
Yeah, and track it in SQL. You can track this information.
Sell.
No. There's a plug. There's data rich. Come on, we can help you on that. No, and move on from that. Right. There's just one question a bit earlier on that we said about rent ceilings again. So just confirming the fact that new developments are going to be CPI +1. But I think we've discussed this. It's going to be in the detail.
Yeah,
there's always detail on what comes out. So we will have a follow-up on what comes out in hopefully November, and we'll answer that question. Yeah, great. Okay, I think we should move on. Paul, we really wanted to, time is kind of rushing on, is just to show in ProVal, our little hints and tips section. Thank you, Doug, for that. Where does this get looked at and discussed in ProVal? And I think sometimes it can be quite difficult if you're not using it as detailed as we do on a regular basis to know where this is. I mean, obviously this is a sensitivity setting as such, so your assumptions should be reviewed, and perhaps it's a really good time at this time of year to look at your assumptions and go in detail and do some testing. So Paul, over to you.
Super.
And I'll filter any questions.
Been some good questions and good to speak about. So though there are probably many of you in the group today that have used ProVal for a number of years. So in the past, we have always had a double or dual cash flow model. So we've had a development cash flow and a single cash flow. There have been changes in the market. We are developing a online or web-based version of Proval. This is some time away, but we decided that if we were going to go to a major change of Proval, the market, and lots of people have wanted to be able to model things like NPV and IRR right from the beginning, from the first day that money is spent. So in other words, we did have a backwards or extrapolation of NPV back to the beginning of the cash flow, but it is literally just an extrapolation. So we took a decision quite a while ago that if we're going to go to the cloud, we're going to go for a single cash flow model rather than a dual cash flow model. So to bring everybody on the journey, we decided we would change the installed version of Proval at the same time, which we have done. So that's already in place. So those of you who don't have it, it is available if you want it. So what does that mean? It means I can model interest, my long-term interest, right from the beginning, and I can model my NPV and consequentially my IRR right from the beginning or at a point in the future. So there are some settings inside Proval that you need to just be aware of, those of you who have got Proval. So if you look at the example that's in front of you, hopefully you can see it, everybody?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so we have the word long-term loans on there comes up, and it's the same as it was before, except right at the very end of the line, this is a new column. You have to tell it, when do you want to calculate? When does this interest apply from? So in other words, if you're going to do the single cash flow model, you're going to, and this is the way we recommend, if you're going to go down the single cash flow model route, you may as well go and boots and all straight in. So there is a new column at the end of the loan section. And it's not always obvious for people to see, and you've got a drop-down choice, and you can have it the way it used to be if you wish, from first handover. And if you leave it blank, it's going to be from first handover, because we've set the software that if nobody touches it, it's going to behave like a dual cash flow model. So if you are going down the single cash flow route, on your templates, you need to set the long-term interest rate, or the interest rate, if that's what we can call it. It's not a long-term one now, it's short-term and long-term, runs from cash flow start. We've made some improvements on cross-subsidy, and you can actually in fact see that in the development cash flow. So those of you who've got cross-subsidy switched on will see it there. Okay, so that's one of the settings that need to be taken care of. In section A, where all the unit information is, you now have in NPV 3 boxes instead of 2. You used to have the NPV discount rate, you used to have the NPV discount term or period, and you now have one, when do I want to start this NPV calculation on this unit from? Bear in mind, you are spending money on a project probably right from the beginning on surveys and things like that. So within the cash flow, there are costs being applied to this unit, even although you might not have laid a brick yet, but it's part of an appraisal that has surveys and titles and land and all that sort of thing applied to it. So therefore, you should set it to cash flow start. And then in section I, where I've got my long-term results, I can ask it when to run the long-term or the outturn NPV from cash flow start is our recommendation. A little quirk that somebody's pointed out to me recently, we haven't really changed the naming on. In the label in the middle, it says NPV at first handover. In actual fact, it should be NPV at, and it should have a changeable label depending on your choices that you've done. That hasn't been done. So please just ignore the words at first handover, go with the NPV setting that you've chosen. So if you have chosen first handover, then the label is right. It should in actual fact say NPV at the choice that you've made, which in this particular case would be at cash flow start. In other words, that NPV that it's displaying there is the whole of the cash flow, if that's the choice that I've made. In the section I, under the long-term results, you've also got NPV of the NPV that's displayed here will tell you what it is, and then that's the actual NPV that's been calculated for the project. So if you're using different settings, you might see some of these change. So just be aware that if I've chosen any other NPV start point, that's going to be from that start point. Okay, there's been a lot of discussion today about rents. So when you're talking about rents,
Paul, can I just stop there? Can I just ask a question on what you said, the NPV change? So why do we do it, and what's the biggest impact is over the development cash flow, isn't it, of the effect of NPV?
Yeah, thanks for that, Andrew. So if I'm going to start my NPV calculation and my interest rate from the beginning, the one that we show in section D in actual fact is irrelevant. It's the NPV cash stream is the one that we've selected. This is the number that's shown in here is the development time frame that you've elected to set for the development interest if you are going to use it. Typically, most organizations, like I've got it here, I've got my NPV of my development cash flow set, my interest rate of my cash flow set the same as my long-term interest as well, or my loan interest. So effectively, this is a display of during that development time frame, how much interest am I accruing in it? It's not going to change the NPV because the NPV is running from cash flow start, because that's what I've elected to do. Yeah. Another benefit of the single cash flow model, we no longer have two cash flows. So in the development cash flow, which is in section D, and I'm in the traditional model, we had another cash flow in section J, which is the long-term cash flow. In actual fact, it is the same cash flow. So do I need to go to D and to J? No, they're actually the same. They're identical in the single cash flow model because there is only a single cash flow. Yeah. What we have done is we've now also aligned the cash flows with your financial year. So at the beginning now you have to say, my financial year runs from typically April to March. So the long-term, the cash flow is now triggered for April to March. But I can also see in the older version, you only had it annually. We now can drill down and say, actually, I want to open up that into quarters, or I want to open a particular quarter up, and I can see it right down to the individual month. So we've collapsed the cash flow like we've done before, just the visuals. All the information is under there. There's my capital, there's my revenue. For those of you in the finance teams where I have expenditure, it's going to be a negative number in this cash flow. Whereas in the old one, we used to show a expenditure line and an income line. So they were all positive numbers. So in actual fact, I'm going to see negative numbers that are expenditure, and I'm going to see positive numbers where it's income. Okay. I can also pre-select on this cash flow the kind of thing I want to see. So this wasn't available. You used to be able to go to section E, and you could then look at a particular unit and see for its costs. So not only can you do that from a cost or outcome point of view, you can now see the cash flow like that as well. So if I want to go and look at my affordable rent stream, I can actually look at the cash flow specifically for the affordable rent or specifically for an individual unit. The same as you did in section E. So the cash flows were not visible. They were always there, but we didn't show them. Then we now in actual fact show them. So I can see when my rent is starting to come in. And if you happen to see some numbers here on the left-hand side, by the descriptions, that's the cash flow that's out of balance. We still have the red marker in the summary panel to show that it's out of balance. Those of you who are SQL users, please remember, don't import a cash flow that's out of balance, because the monies are not in the cash flow. So therefore, those monies will not import into SQL. You need to make sure it's balanced.
Okay, you got 3 minutes to talk about rent inflation.
Okay, super. So as always, and nothing's changed, the rent in the rent box in the bold box is the rent that applies at handover. If I'm doing a social rented unit, that's calculated on the handover date based upon the table in the background. In other words, the rent inflation table, which will give me the handover rent. Of course, for social rented units, I've got to put in the January 99 value, and we will show the target rent and the rent cap as in the past. So just please remember that is the handover rent. Future inflations, and people get a bit mixed up with this sometimes, is in section G. So the handover rent of course, is valid until the next inflation change. And if you've not set the rent month, you can set the rent here. Actually, we inflate our rents from April. If you leave it blank, it's from the next birthday of the unit. In other words, the handover 12 months after handover. Now, most of us don't work that way. We tend to apply inflation to all of our rents from April. So if I'm handing this one over in March, and I've set this to April, I've literally got my handover rent of £116.20, and the very next month I'm going to have whatever inflation is going to be applied by section G in the inflation section. So don't get caught out by that. It does happen. I sometimes get questioned, well, what rent am I going to apply for a unit that hands over in March? I don't have an answer for that. You have to decide yourself. Are you going to start with a rent and the very next month push it up, or are you going to start with the inflated rent, or are you going to give them a holiday for X amount of time? So you can say within the software, I can inflate my rent. So in other words, this unit is handing over in June. So between June 23 and April 24, that rent applies. And then the next inflation period I've set is going to be April. So therefore it will look up in the table, what rent inflation did you want on it to be? And it will automatically go up. I've talked to a few people in the market, and the last few weeks have been very interesting. And some are modeling 1 to 5 years at 1 plus base. In other words, 1 at 5%, 3 plus base at 5%. Some are doing 2 years. Some are trying to do 1 year, because going 1 to 1 doesn't mean anything, because inflation only applies from the next birthday or the next inflation time frame. So you need to do at least 1 to 2 if you want to go to 5%. Has anybody got any questions on that? Have we got time to answer them?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. I think that's really helpful, Paul, because I think those little bits, especially under the unit, as I missed the other day when we were discussing something, and I think that's just above the rents there. I think it's really important. Rent inflate from. So yes, we're open for questions. We have got a couple of minutes left, as we said.
I just want to clarify something,
Thanks, John.
which is the rent inflation that you got in section G is from year 1 to 100. Yeah.
Yep.
And what does year 1 relate to? Year 1 is what?
On capital costs, it's going to be from the birthday of the unit. On the rent, it's going to be the month that you set. So in other words, the next April, I've showed you the example in front of you, it's set to April. So the rent table, that 5% or step rate, that 1 to 5 will apply from April after handover.
Thank you.
So there has been a few people have asked, well, what happens if we've now built this? 2 years ago, we did the appraisal and we now think that the rents are going to be different. You'll need to change the rents in April to reflect the new position. So in other words, have a second version of the appraisal just before you go on site or just before a handover. I've seen many organizations do that. So we have one that was board approved. Then that was 2 years ago. We've now finished building or whatever it happens to be. I'm going to ask my housing management team, what is the new handover rents, because now something's been changed in that time frame. So you should come back to the appraisal and change the one that's in here. So is that going to mean, in theory, if remember this is in future years, the ruling from Homes England is in unknown years, it's 2% plus 1, 3%. So in other words, in Proval at the moment, if you're going to hand this over after April next year, you're already inflating the rents during that time frame at the 3% position. So if we're going to go to 5, which is maybe the discussion that's out there, so the discussion was 3, 5, or 7, you're already at 3. So your appraisals should improve. People are concerned that they might get worse. At the moment, we don't have rent deflation, and heaven help us if we go down that road again, because it created quite a stir for us in between 16 and 20, didn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you, guys. Paul, if you want to stop sharing.
I hope that helps people decide.
That's good. I mean, it's good. It's always good to look at the detail and whatever. Thank you for the questions, everybody. You can pose a couple of questions. We will answer all questions, even though we stopped the webinar. I'm trying to keep this to an hour, so people can get on to their daily work. I just want to thank the team across SDS. They're putting this together because it is a bit of a challenge, probably technical for Cassie, who's new at SDS. Duncan, thank you for your time. I really appreciate that. It's great always to have a chat with you. We'll have a beer soon and see you in obviously in November. And good luck with your modelling over the next couple of weeks and months. And we're here to help if you need any assistance, as you know, and we've helped quite a lot.
Sell.
Yeah, no, I'm here. Team.
Yeah, I know, mate. I know.
Yes,
one team.
Paul, thank you. John, thank you very much. I know you're at clients doing some work on consultancy, so thank you for jumping in on doing that. Just to say where you can book the user group meeting, go to our website, s-d-s.co.uk, and go onto the events page, and you can register for our user group meeting again, 8th of November. It was lovely to go to the CIH in Bristol last week to see a few people, and it was good to talk to people. I'll be out and about in the industry a little bit more this year and next year. So I'll hopefully see you at our user group meeting. It will be, hang on, Paul, it will be recorded. So it will be recorded. If you can't make it, it won't be live, but it'll be recorded afterwards. So, you know, you can see all the kind of great future plans for SDS, because there's lots of things coming up in the future to improve our products and technical part. Paul.
Just a little technical issue. If anybody is trying to download our software or wants to go to the single model at the moment, our downloads page is offline at the moment. Please just drop an email to the support desk and they will send you the software or link to the software. It's something they're making some changes to, so just be aware of that. And Claire Asprey has told us how that they deal with it in their organization, that handing over in March. Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, great. And yeah, we're here to help if you need any assistance for that. So thank you, everybody. Have a good day, have a good week, rest of the week, and catch up with you soon.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.